excited to talk about content. This is my passion, so happy to have everybody here. Just wanted to kick it off here with a brief introduction before we sort of dive in. So just a little bit more about me. Maggie sort of alluded to it, but I am a senior SEO manager here at 2 Octobers, really focusing on content strategy. I joined last June. I was trying to think about this yesterday. All the days are sort of blending together now, right? So time is sort of a lost item right now. So, but June last year, but I do have about 14 years of experience in SEO and content in particular, as well as overall digital marketing from website development, site migrations, technical SEO, basically the whole gambit with both agency and in-house experience along the way. And some of that experience has included managing both enterprise and localized SEO and content for organizations such as Dish, Choice Hotels. I've done brand marketing as well for companies like Expedia, Caesars Entertainment, and a wide variety of others. So I'm really excited to share a lot of the learnings and things that I've really found to work along the way here, just through all of the breadth of experience that I have. And a little bit more about 2 Octobers, just to provide some additional context to what Maggie said. So, of course, we are a digital marketing agency first and foremost, but beyond that, we are really, why I love working here and why I'm so passionate about this team is our purpose is really beyond that in terms of we are a purpose-driven business. We are actually in the process of becoming B Corp certified right now. And what that means is that beyond just looking at general business KPIs, we're really focused on what is the purpose and intent behind all the decisions that we're making as an organization, and really taking into account those things as pertain to everyone that works within 2 Octobers, all of our partners, the environment, and all of those things. So really proud to work for this organization for sure. So why content? Why are we all here today? So of course, all of you are all here because the topic piqued your interest. You may have heard content as a very common buzzword as of late, and content is certainly not a new phrase, especially when it comes to digital marketing. It's something that's been around for a long time. But I think the important thing to note is that the way that content is defined and the way that it is approached has evolved and changed quite drastically over the past few years, let alone even just recently in the past couple of months. As Google and the search engines really continue to evolve the search landscape and how they are approaching the ranking algorithm, it's no longer sufficient to just focus on, okay, well, I have a bunch of products. I'm just going to load product descriptions, maybe a couple of landing pages. That's good. It explains what my company is and people are able to make purchases, or, whatever the purpose of your business is. Really, it's going beyond that at this point. And so I think all of you are probably aware of that and really interested to see, how do we really approach this new content process now? So what brings us here today, some of the questions you may have and that I really hope to dive into today, things like, I keep hearing that content is important, but I'm not really sure if that's true or what that means. A lot of us have limited budget and resources. Should I still be focusing on content as opposed to something else? Is this really a priority for my organization? Whoops, sorry about that. And then, how do I know what type of content that I should be creating? Also, one that I hear a lot is I really want to create some new content, but I'm not sure where to start. My competitors already have content about that. Isn't that redundant? Does it make sense for me to also have content around that particular topic? And fact of the matter is, how does that really help my business and my customers? And kind of going back to that, why should that be a priority? So again, really hoping to dive into that today. And what we'll cover today, just to give everybody a brief agenda here, is taking that into, so what really is effective content in today's search landscape, and why does it matter? Why should this be a priority for you and your organization? And then getting into defining content hubs. So we'll get into what a hub means, but this is really where we start to define, okay, what topics and types of content should I be focused on? Where do I even get started with that? So defining those. Once you've defined those, then the next step is actually building that content out. So how do you approach that? What does that look like? And then, as Maggie said, at the end, we'll conclude with sort of next steps, and then we'll both stay on for any Q&A. So There's going to be a lot of information presented here today, and I really encourage you to just make notes of questions, enter them in the chat. If you think of anything later, really want to use that time to answer any questions, but also work through any challenges or real life problems or questions or things that you're dealing with. Happy to talk through those. So encourage you to stick around for that. So getting started with what is effective content and why does this actually matter? So as I mentioned, content really has evolved from way back when I was just getting started in SEO. It was really just about, okay, I've got a keyword, let me just put that through the content, 200 times and then get a bunch of, link farms to link back to me. Well, clearly that's not the case anymore. So we've really gone away from that, and Google has really evolved to a much more complex algorithm. And so in today's day and age, effective content really needs to be looking at two things primarily, and that is, first and foremost, even beyond the search engines, is addressing your consumer intent. So when you're starting to think about what type of content goes on your website, you really need to start to think about putting yourself in your consumer's shoes, or who your target audience is and what is important to them. And if they came to your site, what information would be helpful to them and what are they looking to find? Once you've established that, then you want to layer in the piece which plays into SEO, which is, of course, creating that optimized content. So making sure that it is appealing for your consumers, it's something that is going to be relevant, which is also something that Google looks for when ranking content. They really want to make sure that, is this content worth serving up? Does this really match the consumer intent? And you do that by going through the research and the process that we're going to talk about today. So if you dive into that a little bit further here, really where you want to live is right in the middle of the three circles that I've outlined here. So like I mentioned, you want to make sure that you're first and foremost addressing your consumer questions and pain points. Now, it doesn't necessarily always have to be a problem that they're having to the point where, it's a huge issue, but it could be a major question or something that if they're making a purchase decision or just a decision in general for conversion, what are those hurdle questions, so to speak, that they need answers to before they make that decision? So starting there, and then also incorporating target keywords. Now, while the search engines have moved away from keyword saturation and just really focusing on putting keywords everywhere, targeting keywords is still an important piece of the pie, and it's something that still is a critical component to the whole process, and we'll get into more of that as well. But then the other quadrant here, really covering your niche or area of expertise. So of course, as I'm sure all of you are feeling, it can be very daunting and overwhelming approaching content because there's such a vast sea of topics, and especially in some industries and markets, there's just a lot of information out there. And so rather than trying to boil the ocean and just kind of go after everything and haphazardly putting content up on your site, if you're trying to just decide what to put up, really defining what your unique value proposition is, really what is your area of expertise and what you really specialize in that you want to focus on. And so all of these things in tandem will allow you to cater to your consumers, establish your authority, and then also benefit search traffic. So again, I think, it's really important to just think about it in that way, because a lot of times, some content really is only approaching pieces of this, but not all of these things in conjunction. And that's a really important approach to take. So now you're thinking, okay, that's great. We've established, what does content look like that's effective? How has the process changed? Well, why does this matter for your organization and how will this help? So getting back to the prioritization question. So in terms of the business impact, so first of all, increasing brand awareness. And there's a lot of ways that you can measure this. So whether or not you're a new brand or even an established brand, there are always new customers out there that you want to go after, or new audiences. And this is very easily measured from your content efforts. You can look at your SEO as well as overall site traffic, of course, new users to the site, other channels like social media activity and shares. So if people are discussing your brand more frequently on social channels and sharing more about your brand, that's a sign that you're increasing your brand awareness. Maybe they're sharing some content or a blog post or something that you put up on the site. And of course, referral traffic as well. So if you're seeing an influx of traffic from different domains that maybe you weren't receiving before, that's a sign of increased brand awareness. Additionally, increased engagement. So it's great to bring people to the site, but it's also important to keep them engaged. And that's important, of course, because you want to lead them along the path of whatever conversion metrics that you are measuring. And so some of the things that you can do to measure that, reduce bounce rates, increase page views, again, social media shares, that's another frame of engagement, and then general inbound links. So if you're seeing a lot more backlinks to your site and general inbound links, that's another sign of increased engagement. And then, of course, you have your established customer base as well. Now, this is often overlooked, but it's an important piece that content does play into, and that is improved customer retention. And so this is something that you can measure just by looking at the percentage of your return visitors versus your total traffic, and just seeing what that proportion is versus new users as well. Content also really helps with acquiring higher lead quality and quantity, because going back to what I was discussing on the previous slide, you're really tapping into consumer intent here. And so being a little bit more thoughtful about the content that you're putting up and your approach will in turn bring more qualified traffic, which will generate your higher lead quality and more leads as well, because you're bringing people that actually associate with your brand and that are actually relevant. And so all of that is measurable through leads, conversions, conversion rate, and email signups, for example. And of course, increased sales. So if we have more compelling content, we're able to increase that brand awareness and engagement and prompt conversions. We'll see that through an increase in conversions and overall revenue to the site. And then one that I always love to see, and I know everyone that I've worked with loves to see as well, is improved competitive positioning. And so really beating out your competition and increasing your visibility. And the way that you can track that is through an increased share of voice. Share of voice really just measures, of all of the keywords that you're targeting, how many of those are you actually receiving prominent visibility for versus your competition. Now, I'm generally not a huge fan of honing in on keyword rankings as a metric, because as you may or may not know, ranking is quite a volatile metric. It depends on so many factors. There's a lot of localization, search history, et cetera, that goes into that. But I do think that it is still a valuable way to measure any traction that you're getting from some major content initiatives. You can identify a small subset of keywords that you really want to target, and then over time, measure how you're trending against those. And that's a great way to see what impact that you're having as a result of all of this new content that you're working on. And so here's just an example of a client of 2 Octobers, just to give you a sense of some of the results that you could see. Now, again, this will vary, depending on industry and the particular business, but this is a trend that we have seen and that I've seen over the course of my career in terms of really starting to focus in on, that SEO focused content that's tapping into consumer intent. And you can see here when this particular client started to do that, the traction that they were able to see across the board in things like visibility, which you can see here from first page keywords, organic traffic, and then purchases, so those sales and conversions increasing. Now, of course, there's going to be other items that factor into this as well, but it's a pretty clear-cut path to success once that content became a priority for this particular organization. Okay, so now that we've talked a little bit about, what's effective content, how can it help your business, and why should it matter to you? Now we'll talk more about the specific process in terms of getting started. Again, we're going to get into a lot here, so please make note of any questions or enter them in the chat as we go along, and I'd be happy to help answer those at the end. So we're going to start off here by defining content hubs. So how do I know where to start? What topics should I be going after? So within defining your content hubs, there's 4 key steps here as I see it. So that starts off with identifying your business goals, reviewing your analytics information, researching FAQs, and then assessing search trends. So starting off with identifying business goals. Now you may say, Yasmin, this seems like a really obvious step. Like, why does this matter? And it may be obvious, but it is often overlooked. And the reason I think this is so important to take a step back and look at is because, again, content is a very vast undertaking, and it's pretty labor intensive, and there's a lot that goes into it, and it can be overwhelming trying to prioritize. So it's really important that you sit back and say, okay, what are my top 2 to 3 business goals that I want to achieve? And how can I tie my content production and efforts into that? So you really want to make sure that your content is supporting these primary goals, because that's going to help you to prioritize what content that you actually start with in terms of immediate plans, and then you can focus more on some more long-term development plans as well. So thinking about things like, are you launching a new product? Are you trying to target a specific group or audience? Are you trying to grow sales of a particular product? These are some questions that you may ask yourselves as you're going about trying to figure out, what are my goals and how can content help me achieve those? Once you've established what your goals are, the next thing is to take a look under the hood, as I like to say, and just to get a sense of, okay, great, I know what my business goals are, but I really have no idea what people might be searching for. I just don't even know where to start. Analytics is a great place to start with this. And the 2 tools that I would suggest would be Search Console and Google Analytics. You can use any analytics platform if you have another one that you're utilizing. But for purposes of this presentation, we're going to focus on analytics just because it is a free tool and it's more readily available. And the majority of businesses do have this implemented. So we'll walk through how you can utilize these to help you really identify what content topics that you may already be performing well for, where you could achieve some, quick wins, quote unquote, or some that may be requiring some more development for you to be a bit more competitive in those areas. So I really love to start with Search Console. If you haven't delved into Console at all, I highly recommend it. As you are aware, the analytics tools, there is not keyword level data in there anymore. So that was done away with years ago. And why I love Search Console so much is that you're able to take a look at keyword level data here. So you can see things like clicks, impressions, click-through rate, and average rank. So this is just a snapshot here, just to give you an idea. And then in order to find this, I have a path here for you to just reference if you want to jot that down. If you go under performance and search results and then open report, you'll be able to see that. And you can also see page level data as well. But for purposes of this, we're going to walk through how you can utilize this query data to help you identify some search topics. So what I love to suggest is that what you do is take that keyword level data and export it for the past 12 months. And reason being is because then that gives you a good sort of trend line to see, okay, maybe in the last 6 months, these keywords were doing well, but previously they weren't, or vice versa. So it's good to look at the last year of data just to give you a good data set to work with. And this is just an example of an export that I did, where you can just quickly export this into an Excel spreadsheet or Google Sheet and start to see what your impressions are. And just to provide some context, so impressions are how many times you actually showed up for that keyword, how many times somebody actually clicked through for that particular query. And then of course, click-through rate would be, the clicks over impressions, and then what's your average position over time for that past 12 months. And then you can see here, I've applied some color coding just to show different ranges where ranking in the top 10 would be green because we're performing well for those keywords, whereas yellow, maybe we're sort of on the cusp of performing well, and then red, maybe a little bit further down or beyond the first couple of pages of results. So how is this data useful? Well, there's a couple of ways that you can approach this. And why I love it is because it really helps you to identify some more immediate opportunities as well as long-term. So if you're looking at immediate opportunities, really here you want to look for keywords where you're seeing a high number of impressions coupled with a good rank, a low click-through rate, and high impressions is going to vary depending on the website. If you're looking at a smaller site, perhaps a few hundred or 1,000 impressions would be high. But if you are a site that receives a substantial amount of traffic, tens of thousands of impressions may be more appropriate. So you can kind of use your judgment there for what is high. Good rank generally would be something that is ranking within positions 1 to 10, potentially 11 through 15, sort of on that page 2, sort of on the cusp there. And a low click-through rate, I generally like to use anything below 3% as being low. And the reason that we segment this out is because this is essentially saying, okay, I'm getting a high amount of impressions, which means I'm getting a lot of visibility. I'm showing up a lot for this keyword. because I have this good rank. So maybe I'm showing up a lot, I'm in position 10, for example, but for some reason I have a low click-through rate. And so what that is indicating, and something to try, is that potentially your title and meta description and the information that is populating in the search results is not compelling to users, at least compared to the other results that are populating. And so this is really great because this is something where you can go and identify these keywords and then actually say, okay, let me go through and see the pages that I can actually go in and optimize my title and meta description for these particular keywords, maybe call them out a little bit more pronouncedly, et cetera, et cetera. And that can help you to sort of boost your click-through rate and try to get more clicks that way. Now, if you're seeing something where you're getting a lot of visibility, and now keep in mind with impressions, that doesn't necessarily mean that someone saw your results. So you'll often see, you'll have a lot of impressions, even if your rank, as in this example, is poor, which would be, something beyond page 2, because essentially all that's saying is that your result was served. So it populated within the search results. So if you're seeing a situation where your result is being served by Google and you have a poor rank and a low click-through rate, that's probably more of a sign where, okay, if this is going to be a focus area for me and this is a topic I think I may want to go after, I need to be adding content to, if I've got a page that maybe is ranking in whatever page it is, try adding more content to that page first, and then maybe building out some supplementary pages to help to bolster that up. So Search Console is a great starting point to just start to segment out a little bit in terms of immediate and long-term opportunities. Now, on top of that, Google Analytics is also great. So as you start to dive into Search Console, you're seeing, okay, I'm seeing a lot of keywords around whatever topic. Maybe that's something I should be looking at, and you start to identify some trends there. You can use Google Analytics to really support a lot of what you're seeing in Search Console, or maybe you want to shy away from it. So the way that you can do that is I like to look at the pages report within, if you go under behavior and site content and you take a look at all pages, you can see things like here, if you're having a page that has a lot of traffic, maybe that's a popular topic that you want to build on. And on the contrary, if you're seeing a page that has a really high bounce rate, maybe that's a page where you need some more compelling content. There are situations, of course, where a higher bounce rate is warranted and it makes sense for that page. But if it's a page where you're saying, that doesn't really make sense, I think people should be more engaged there, why are they dropping off at that page? That could be an indication. So really using data like this from GA to supplement what you found in Search Console is a great starting point to get a sense of what sort of activity are you already getting on your site. So it gives you a good sort of benchmark and baseline to start from as you're starting to ideate on these topics. So now that you've gone through, you've established your business goals, you've taken a look a little bit at analytics and Search Console data, this is the part, this is one of my favorite steps in the process, and this is where you really start to tap into your consumer intent. So the next step in the process is researching FAQ content. And there's a lot of different approaches to this, and we're just going to touch on a couple today that I really like. But this is where you're looking at trying to identify what questions that your consumers or target audience frequently have around some of the topics that you're considering. And as you identify these questions, you're going to start to identify patterns and trends and be able to categorize those questions according to the themes. So this is going to help you to say, okay, I've got this long list of questions and I see these words are showing up a lot here. Maybe that's a topic that I need to address. I need to be building out a lot of pages around that. And we'll walk through an example here so you can see how that actually works. So here's an example of one of the tools that is great. It's a free resource. It's called answerthepublic.com, and this will be noted in the summary sheet that Maggie's going to send out after the call. But here you can actually go in and input. So I'm using the example here of running shoes. I was recently shopping for these and thought it would be a good example to walk through. So running shoes, you can actually categorize this by country. So if you are in a different country other than the US, you are able to see different search behavior as well by country and as well by language. And then once you hit search there, what this will do is actually produce a list of categorized questions by the different question modifiers that people are searching for around, in this example, running shoes. So this is a great list of data to start from. And the way that you would utilize this is actually pull out those questions and start to categorize those, as I mentioned. And so in this example, you can see here, I've tried to highlight things to make it easy to follow here. But as I'm taking just these 3 specific buckets of questions, I'm identifying a couple of key phrases here. So are running shoes good? Can running shoes be? And how running shoes? Now, all of these to me immediately indicate, okay, this is clear that, having just product-based content and, information about, these running shoes are blue and they have this type of sole, that's not going to be sufficient because all of these modifiers are research-based, and that's the intent behind them. And if I start to dive into that a little bit more, I can see here, as I've squared out here for you in boxes, it looks like people are searching for multi-use for running shoes. So you see terms like walking, hiking, working out, cross-training. So people are looking for, what type of versatility do running shoes offer? Now, this is something, again, see, this isn't necessarily something that you would point out on a product page and requires some more advanced content development, as well as things like, the fit. So people are looking for how they should be, how they should fit, how they should feel when I try them on. Things like care, so how to wash them, when should I be replacing them? So really starting to go through these and identifying those patterns and trends is a great way to utilize this tool and get started on the topic ideation. Now, once you've done that, so if we're taking a couple of examples from the questions that we just saw, a couple of them, again, we're looking at running shoe versatility. So I just pulled out the training, hiking, and walking categories. So once you do that, what you want to do is couple that with a keyword research tool. Now, there's a lot of them out there. I just noted here SEMrush. I think it's a great tool where you can pull lists of associated keywords and start to identify estimated search volume. So really, I like to use this, don't get too hung up on the exact numbers, but use this as more directional information. So you can see here what I did was I see a lot of people asking questions according to the data that I pulled on training versus running shoes. And if I just enter a search for that in SEMrush, these are the types of keywords that come back, and I'm getting over 5,000 searches a month for that, as well as for hiking shoes and walking shoes, several thousand searches a month for those as well. So when you're seeing things like that, where you have a notable amount of search volume, that may be something where you need to take a step back and say, okay, that's something where I need to consider creating some individual pages for content if I don't already have those on my site. Once you've gone through and established, okay, I've looked at the FAQs, I've started to identify some patterns, I've coupled that with the search volume estimations for the month, then you start to align that, where does that actually fall within the sales funnel or the consumer search journey, or however you want to look at it. And the reason why this step is important is because this really allows you to align with, not only where your consumer is and make sure that you're catering to that in the process, but it also helps you to identify what type of content that you should be creating. So if we take this example here of training versus running shoes, most of these keywords, again, are research-based, which I would put into the consideration or sort of mid-funnel content. People aren't unaware where they have no idea where they're starting, but they're also not really quite ready to make a decision yet. They need some more information. Maybe they want to know that they can use their running shoes for training, or they want to know, do I need to buy 2 separate pairs of shoes for this? So as I'm starting to see that in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, these are the types of queries and information. To me, maybe a purchase guide makes sense, where I have a couple of e-commerce pages where I have maybe some products showcased there, but also supported with maybe some blog pages where I answer some more of these questions that don't necessarily make sense to live on a product or an e-commerce page, but are still really important to help close that conversion gap. So here you can see I've just outlined a couple of examples here. In the awareness stage, again, these are generally going to be very high search volume keywords, very general. So something like running shoes would probably be awareness because people just really aren't sure what they're looking for at all. And this is something where maybe you're doing more on the social media front, more infographics, maybe more high level blog post content, just to sort of establish that awareness. Consideration, quite honestly, is where a lot of keywords tend to reside, because when people go online, they're generally doing research. They're trying to find information to help them make that decision. And there's a lot of types of content that you can do for consideration. Some examples here, just like I said, guides. You can do things like quizzes are very popular, calculators are very popular. For example, like interest rate calculators if somebody's trying to purchase a home or take out a loan or something like that, as well as competitive comparisons. A lot of table views or calling out, the main things that people are trying to compare across different companies. Those are very popular and very helpful for the consideration phase. And then when you get down into decision, it's going to be more things to prompt conversion. So it could be things like a promo code, a free trial, or maybe some review-based content as well. So here's an example. Again, once I've kind of gone through and established, okay, I think all of this is very research-based. I should be creating some sort of guide for running shoes. This is the very generic layout of what that could look like, where I sort of couple the are running shoes good, can running shoes be, how running shoes, all of those different phrases here into a comprehensive guide where I'm addressing the most frequently answered questions. So again, just pulling out a couple of the common themes I saw. So having some type of page about running versus walking shoes, running versus training shoes, and then running versus hiking. So this is how you would start then to define and build out the specific pages that you want to have within that guide or whatever that hub is that you're building out. The next step in the process is, once you've actually gone through and done that, taking a look at the search trends. So this is important because it's going to allow you to, in the previous step, we really looked at what type of content made sense, what content formats made sense. This is looking at more seasonal versus evergreen content. And a great tool to do this is Google Trends. So this really helps you to say, okay, with those running shoes topics that I'm looking at, is there sufficient demand over time to support this? Do I see ebbs and flows in the demand? Is this something where it would just be a seasonal page, or is this something that I would have year round and really start building off of this? So again, Google Trends is a free tool. It's a really great tool. Again, this is very directional data. Everything is on a scale of 0 to 100, so don't get too hung up on the numbers. Again, just use it for more directional information. But you could see here, you can put in the specific terms. So I put in running shoes here. And this also allows you to refine it by category, the specific time frame, and the search type as well. So you can see here, if I'm taking a look at this, I can say, all right, there's a little bit of ebb and flow, but generally there's pretty consistent, substantial demand over time. So this is something where I probably want to have some evergreen content on the site. And just below that, you'll see another section, which is also really helpful. It dives into related topics and queries. And this is where you can also start to see other, associated content that may make sense around this. So I tried to group this out here to show you a couple of things that I saw that stood out to me. Within related topics, you could see there's some different terminologies. So people looking at shoes, running, sneakers, so some different ways of searching for those items, as well as some specific brands. So maybe I need to call out, if I have the ability to do so in some capacity, these particular brands. If I'm looking at maybe a competitive comparison, Nike and Brooks Sports are probably two brands that I want to call out because those are trending and there's a lot of demand around those. Looking at related queries, again, you see some brand in there. And then maybe best of. Best is a very common modifier when it comes to research-based queries. So that's something that you can get creative with as well. While you can't necessarily call out, you have the best product unless, that you have an award or something to support that. But you can certainly put things on there on the page talking about what make your product so quality, having review content to support that, and things like that. So we just went through a lot on how to define content hubs. So before we move into how you actually start building those out, I wanted to go ahead and summarize. And these summary tables are actually going to be provided following the call. So you'll have these to refer to later on. So just to remind everyone, again, the first step is identifying business goals. This is really where you're going to be able to start prioritizing your content development and making sure that your efforts are aligned with whatever your goals are. The tool for this, internal discussion. It's free, just getting on the same page with your team and really understanding, what you want to use content to help support. From there, reviewing your analytics. So again, a very great starting point as you're looking for a place to kick off topic brainstorming and really getting a general assessment of where you currently stand in the market. So are there opportunities for you to uncover some quick wins there, or things that you can more immediately address, like we talked about with the title and meta description optimization, as well as some long-term content development opportunities. And then again, those would be through Google Analytics and Google Search Console, which are both free, and then any other analytics platforms you can get similar information as well. Then researching your FAQs. So again, identifying those pain points or frequently asked questions and categorizing those and sensing and understanding themes among those questions. Answer the Public is the tool that I discuss here today. Also, Ask is another great free resource. This will actually show you a list in a tree diagram form of frequently people also ask questions that populate on search results. So you can get a sense for what's happening real time as well, just for some other information. And then I mentioned SEMrush, and I also really like Ahrefs. It has very similar information as well. But this is not an exhaustive list, of course. There's lots of different tools that you can use. These are just some to get you started. And then finally, assessing the search trends. So again, really supporting all of the topic ideas that you may have gotten from the first few steps, and then really supporting those with the demand trends and starting to identify between seasonal and evergreen content opportunities based off information that you are deriving from Google Trends. So now that we've talked about how you actually define what those content hubs look like, we're going to get into how you actually start to construct or build those hubs out. So here again, there's 4 key steps. You'll start off by assessing the search landscape, then reviewing your competition, organizing your hubs, and then producing your content. So if we start off assessing your search landscape, this is a very simple step to do, because all you need to do is take a look at the search results. So essentially here, you're just trying to see, for example, in our example that we just went through, who's actually ranking for running shoes, who's showing up for featured snippets and people also ask and other search features, who has those coveted top few positions, and what are they actually doing. So if we take a look at that example, and we take the training shoes versus running shoes, right? In the previous section, we talked about maybe it makes sense to build a page out for training versus running shoes. Okay, well, what type of content should I have for that? If we take a look at the search results, you can see here, okay, we've got a paid ad. And then what I'm seeing here at the top of the page right away is you'll see that first box there is what we call a featured snippet, which is obviously a really coveted position because you're having essentially position 0 there above all of your search results. And then you're seeing here a list of people also ask. So if you collapse each of these questions, there is an associated website that is ranking for those. So, okay, I'm seeing there's a good opportunity here. I can try to maybe rank for some of these questions, but what are these sites that are actually ranking? What are they doing? So if I dive into that further, I see on the featured snippet here, asics.com, they've got basically a guide, like we talked about, that's actually defining what running and training shoes are, what they're used for, can they be used together, what the differences are, what the risks of using the wrong shoes. Basically a very comprehensive guide that talks about anything that the consumer would want to know about training versus running shoes. The people also ask questions here really also support that type of content, right? Because you can see here the questions are also talking about cross-use and versatility, running and training, using for other activities like walking and differences and things of that nature. So really just conducting some manual searches will give you a great sense of, okay, what is, now that I kind of know what my user intent is, what is Google actually looking for, and what does Google think the intent is behind these queries, and what should I actually be creating for that? So the next step, once you've sort of looked at, okay, I've kind of got a sense for that landscape and I've seen who's ranking well for that. Now you start to dive into your competition and really determine again, which competitors are ranking well for these topics that you're considering and how are they doing that? So again, the most basic and easy way to approach that is just a manual review of the search results, but you can also use other supplementary tools like SEMrush again and Ahrefs to sort of identify which sites have the most visibility and share of voice for those topics. So if we dive in here, so I just took the running shoes query again, just to give a different view. So you can see here, okay, I've got my overall search results here about running warehouse, you know, a couple of other retailers here. And then I have people also ask, and I just expanded one out here so you could kind of see what that looks like collapsed. And so this kind of starts to give you a sense of, okay, who's ranking for what? Do I see any competitor that's maybe ranking for a featured snippet and a general result? And maybe a people also ask, because clearly they know what they're doing for content, right? So what are they actually doing and how are they structuring that? So in this particular example, I can see here Nike has a page that is ranking on the main search results, but also people also ask. So they're getting some good visibility there. So how are they actually doing that? Well, let's take a look at that page. So the page that's actually ranking for that is this running shoes page. So what you can see here is we've got two primary headers on the page in the world of SEO, which are your H1 and H2. And you know, these still hold a lot of prominence in terms of ranking. And you can see here their H1 is running shoes and their H2 is Nike running shoes. All the H1 is just your primary page header, and your H2 is your secondary header. And what we've seen time and again is a lot of those featured snippets or search features on the results are pulling particularly from H2 content. So actually, you know, incorporating your target phrases in there and then coupling that, you can see here with FAQ style content, as Nike has done, they're really addressing a lot of those questions and that information that we saw from the people also ask questions. And looking at answerthepublic.com, as we saw in the previous section, they've really tapped into that. And you can see here, they've also incorporated some internal links to product pages to support that they have a relevant product for that. So internal linking is another important piece there as well, which we'll get into a bit more later. And like I mentioned, you can also use a variety of paid tools. Here's a snapshot from Ahrefs, just to give you a sense, going back to running shoes again. This just gives a list of domains that have the most visibility. So if you want a quicker approach to it, or just a different approach to look at the data, you can then start to see, and you can see here Nike is third on the list, and you've got Running Warehouse and Runner's World. Those are probably the three that I would start to take a look at their site and really dive into, okay, let me take a look at, you know, beyond just their product pages, how are they actually organizing their content? Do they have a blog? What type of information are they including on their product pages? Maybe they have, you know, review content or FAQ style content or that competitive comparison information that we were talking about. So just a lot of different ways that you can start to really dive into your competitors and what's working. Once you've done that and really taken a look at, okay, now I understand what type of content that I need to be creating, you can start to organize your hubs. So we'll dive into exactly what that means. But here you're just going to essentially create this hub page and then build subtopic pages to support that. And your hub is really going to be the anchor for all of the content that you start building out around a particular topic. So here's what that would look like in practice. So you'll have your main content hub, and this will target whatever your primary, you know, high volume main keyword is going to be. And then you'll have, there's unlimited number of pages that you could really have to support this, right? It just depends on how many questions, what the associated volume is, how many different topics that you can go after, but you'll build all of those subtopic pages around this and make sure that you're linking all of those to the main hub. And the reason why this format is important is because this really signifies to, you know, not only your consumers, because clearly you've covered all of the questions that they're looking for answers to, but you're also signaling to Google, hey, I'm an authority on this subject. I not only have a page about running shoes, I have a page about comparing running shoes to walking shoes, comparing them to hiking shoes. I understand what my consumers are looking for, and I've addressed all of that here. And Google will absolutely favor that and boost you within the search results. So once you've started to establish what those hubs will look like, you'll start to build them out by producing your content. And so when you do that, you're going to create a content calendar. Now, there's a lot of different formats that you can do in terms of content calendars. The important thing here is that you just want to make sure that you're keeping track of the high-level topic hubs that you're going after and all of the subtopic content that you're producing, right? So that you can make sure that you're adequately supporting each topic. You're keeping track of when things are going live. You know, there's probably a lot of moving parts within your organizations and different team members. You probably have, you know, writers and people actually publishing the content and decision makers and lots of people that need to be seeing this. So it's important to actually keep track of all of that in a format that makes sense for you and your team. So this is just one format that works really well. So here you can see we've outlined what the Content Hub topics would be. So based off all the information from Answer the Public, a lot of the frequently asked questions, you know, thinking that, okay, maybe we need some comparison information, care and maintenance, and maybe, you know, selection in terms of how to choose. So this is just an example here for comparisons. That would be where you maybe have your running versus training versus walking versus hiking. And then under care and maintenance, you could have a page on, you know, how do you wash running shoes? That's something a lot of people are looking for and they're not sure. How long do they last? When should you be replacing them? And then maybe under selection, you start to build things out around, you know, choosing the right fit. Maybe you have a whole guide on that, width and firmness, support, all of that. And then along with that, so I just went through the subtopics there. So you would highlight your subtopics. Potentially, depending on how complex or involved the high-level topic is, you may have more than one subtopic. So, you know, that's optional. You'll kind of get a feel for it as you start to map out if you need to have another level there. But then just keeping track of, you know, once you publish the content, what is the name and title of that content, just so you have that for your reference. Of course, you'll want to include any target keywords for your writer. I recommend no more than 2 to 3 keywords per page to target. So any more than that, you really start to dilute. So really keep it to 2 to 3. Status, so you can keep track of things going approved, live, needing review, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, the live URL for review. And then the publish location too, which is, you know, some of this content, and we'll get into this a bit, is going to make more sense for blog or the main site. So really making that decision of what makes sense for you and your brand, and where is that content actually going to reside when the content was actually published. This is important because as you start to track things like, you know, the keywords or the search phrases that you really want to try to build visibility around, you can go back and make notes of that in your analytics tool and start to monitor the trend from that point forward. And then, of course, any notes for your writer or the team or anybody else that may be referencing this. So in terms of producing the actual content, so we talked about, you know, having 2 to 3 target keywords. You've probably established those from the previous steps that we've gone through. But another really great step to do to support that is include what are called semantically related keywords. And all that is a fancy way to say, you know, keywords that people are also looking for that are really similar, but are probably going to be a bit more long-tailed, lower search volume than your high-level keyword. And that's, you know, not to say that they're not going to perform as well. All this does is it provides you a way to be able to incorporate some additional related phrases throughout your content. So you can do so in your metadata, your header tags. We talked about the H1 and H2. And throughout just your main body content. Again, with this, we want to make sure that we're not stuffing the content, right? So I typically recommend when you're writing out content to try to incorporate your target keyword pretty straight away within the first paragraph. And I would limit that depending how long. If you've got content that's maybe 1,000 words, I think 2 to 3 mentions is more than sufficient. And then your semantically related keywords, you could have maybe 1 mention of each throughout, but the most important thing is just making sure that it's naturally worded and doesn't sound forced. And then beyond that too, just incorporating internal links. So going back to that hub model that we talked about, you know, making sure that you're linking to other related pieces of content so that you're really helping Google and your users to discover the other content that's related to that topic. So some of the ways that you can start to identify related keywords, again, just doing a general search. So if you go to the bottom of search results, as I'm sure you've all seen, you'll see searches related. So here's searches related to running shoes. You can start to see some other phrases that may make sense to incorporate. There are also a lot of tools out there. A lot of them are referred to LSI keywords. So if you Google that, you'll find a whole bunch that come back. But LSI Graph is one that I really like. It is a paid tool, but there's a limited, I think you get up to 3 searches per day, and you can see some limited data, but it does provide you a list of related keywords that you can use. And quite frankly, any of the other tools as well, SEMrush, Ahrefs. If you type in your main keyword any of those other, what I refer to as a long tail keywords. So anything generally that's going to be 3 or more words total and lower search volume, you can still derive some keywords from there that you're able to use throughout the content as well. So if we look at that hub example and how that would actually look with the running shoes example. So my hub page would be running shoes at its high level, and that would be an e-commerce page, right? Because if I was a Nike or an Asics, I'm definitely going to have a running shoes page with products to sell on it. But maybe beyond that, I want to create 3 more e-commerce pages, you know, assuming that I also offer trail running shoes, that specific category, or maybe I also offer training shoes and walking shoes. So maybe I start to think about how I can have some subcategory e-commerce pages beyond just an endlessly scrolling running shoes page that really cater to what my consumers are looking for and are going to help me in the search results. And then, you know, we talked about a couple of other content pieces as well, like how to clean and care for running shoes and choosing the right fit. Now, these may be ones that you say, well, you know, I don't really want to have a page about cleaning shoes on my, you know, main landing pages or main navigation, but that would make sense perhaps for your blog page. And then you could certainly have an internal link or some cross-sell features on that page going back to some of your product pages. So this is just an example. You know, I get a question a lot about how do I know if it should be an e-commerce or blog page? And the answer, like a lot of things in search, is it depends, right? It sort of depends. Like if you only had maybe 1 pair of trail running shoes, I probably wouldn't create a whole page around that. Maybe I would just have some supporting content briefly addressing that on the main e-commerce page. So just make sure that you have enough product to support it if you are considering creating an e-commerce page. But there's really no wrong approach. It's just the point is really just taking that thoughtful approach of going after the consumer intent and then coupling that with the SEO and the optimization piece, and then mapping it out in this hub format, and then just remembering that internal link piece so that you're just facilitating that discoverability of the content. So we talked through a lot on constructing content hubs. So again, just to recap here. So starting off with assessing your search landscape. So this is where you really just start to understand what type of content that Google's actually favoring for those top ranked positions. And again, that's just a free search on your browser, getting a sense of what competitors are ranking and what content is actually being served. Once you've done that, reviewing your competition. So identifying what competitors have the best visibility from that first step, and how you can create the content. And the point here is, we talked about in the beginning, if somebody's already creating that, do I need to really be making a blog post about how to clean running shoes? And the answer is yes. If there's a lot of people looking for that, and there's a lot of search volume and questions around that, absolutely. Even if there's hundreds of pages about that, the point is you want to look at who is ranking best for that and make your content but better. You want to be better than their content. And by taking this approach, you certainly will be. And then just recapping some of those tools, SEMrush, Ahrefs, and then again, you could just do a simple browser search here as well. And then organizing your hub. So once you have all these topic ideas that you're thinking about kind of floating around, actually taking time to map those out and establish those connections. So figuring out what are the core topics going to be and what are the subtopics going to be that really support that, and then mapping those out, you know, either in a Google sheet or an Excel sheet or whatever makes sense for you and your organization. And then finally, of course, producing the content. So once you have that whole plan outlined, creating that content calendar. Again, always make sure that when you're writing content, it's written first for the users. So go back, take a look at those people also ask questions. Make sure you address all of those in your content. Pull in some of those questions that are coming back from Answer the Public or any of those FAQ research tools, and then start to layer in the optimization piece. I always say that you should write the content first as if you are speaking to the user and addressing all of their concerns and questions, and then go back and optimize it for SEO. And that's how you're going to have the strongest content strategy possible. So we've talked through a lot here today, and before we sort of start to wrap up and go into the office hours, you know, I do want to mention that what we've talked about, it seems like a lot of information, but this is really just a subset of content marketing and content strategy. You know, today, I think we really tapped into how you start to approach content, how you should be thinking about it differently versus in the past, how you start to define what your content hub should be and how you start building those out. But this is really just a fragment. Again, I mean, there's so much that goes into this. Once you have the content built, it's promoting that content, right? And starting to look at, people hate the term backlinking, but thoughtful and quality backlinking is still relevant, and it's still an important piece of the pie, right? Partnering with local websites or directories or any other websites that are relevant and trying to get mentions back, working with guest bloggers or having mentions on social media and really promoting that content. That's a whole other workshop, unfortunately, that we don't have time for today, but I just want to reiterate that, we really just scratched the surface here, and I really hope that this was helpful for you today, to at least get started and kick off your content strategy and ideation. So in terms of what's next, we talked a lot about content marketing today, and 2 Octobers, of course, we offer content marketing. I'm super passionate, as I'm sure you could tell, about content. We work with all of our partners to help craft content strategy that makes sense based off everything that we discussed here today, that really produces that visibility, traffic, and conversions that everyone is looking for. And then, of course, we've got all of our other turnkey digital services as well. SEO too, which is a huge piece, and a lot of overlap there with content, as well as, of course, SEM, marketing analytics, email marketing, and as Maggie mentioned in the beginning, training and coaching. So, just really trying to enable all of you on the call with tips and tricks to really just help make your jobs easier, and doing things like this workshop, but then also partnering with you on a long-term basis and really working as partners on, specific content ideas or things that you may need assistance with. So would love to partner with all of you and continue to help you with anything that you may need assistance with. And so with that, please keep in touch. Here's my information, email, LinkedIn, and then as Maggie mentioned, we are going to stick around for a bit. So really hope that you've made notes of your questions. If you didn't, if you think of anything, would love to help you walk through anything and everything. I love talking about this. So thank you so much for joining, and hope you can stick around for the Q&A. Thank you.